Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills and a sparkling lake, lived a young man named Thomas. Thomas was known throughout the village for his infectious laughter and his even bigger dreams. He'd often talk about leaving their small town and seeing the world, about the exciting adventures he'd have and the stories he'd bring back. The villagers, while envious of his adventurous spirit, would chuckle at his fantastical tales and carry on with their daily routines. They knew Thomas, with his wandering eyes and restless heart, would never settle down. One day, Thomas came back from the market with an unusual purchase, a small caged bird. It wasn't just any bird, it was a nightingale, famous for its enchanting songs that could make the stars dance in the sky. Thomas placed the cage in the center of his home, its song echoing through the small rooms. "I've bought us freedom," he announced to his family, his eyes shining with excitement. "With the money we'll get for this bird, we can buy a passage on a ship and leave this village. We'll travel to far-off lands and experience all the adventures I've been telling you about." His wife and children looked at him, their faces etched with worry. Ever since Thomas had brought the bird, its mournful song had filled their home, a stark contrast to the lively tunes he'd always hum. Its melodies seemed to weave tales of sorrow and loss, each note a reminder of the life they were about to leave behind. The next morning, before the sun had chased away the shadows, Thomas was out the door. He went to the market, intending to sell the bird and start their journey. But as he reached the marketplace, the bird in the cage began to sing. Its song echoed through the cobblestone streets, drawing people from their homes and shops. Soon a crowd had gathered, their faces a mix of awe and envy. An old man in the crowd recognized the bird as a nightingale, a creature of myth and legend. He stepped forward and offered Thomas a hefty sum of money for it. Thomas, taken aback by the offer, hesitated. In that moment, the old man leaned closer and whispered, "This bird doesn't just sing, it carries with it the essence of those who love it. I know a princess who would give anything to hear the song of such a bird." And so Thomas, enticed by the promise of even greater wealth, decided to accept the old man's offer. As the deal was struck and the payment made, Thomas realized he'd made a terrible mistake. The joy that had filled him moments before was now replaced by regret. Looking at the crowd, he saw not just onlookers, but potential companions for his journey. Their faces, once admiring, now held a hint of skepticism. He wanted to call out to them, to tell them about his plans, but the words stuck in his throat. With the bird sold and his dreams put on hold, Thomas walked away from the market, the sound of the nightingale's song echoing in his ears. It was a tune of freedom for the bird, but for Thomas and his family, it was a lullaby to their hopes and aspirations. Now, whenever Thomas looked at the rolling hills or the sparkling lake, he saw not the adventures that awaited him, but the life he'd given up. The laughter that once defined him turned into a bitter laugh, a mockery of his shattered dreams. And the villagers, sensing his sorrow, stopped inviting him to share his stories. For how can one speak of dreams when their own have been sold? Years went by, and the memory of the nightingale's song faded into a distant echo. But its impact on Thomas remained, a constant reminder of the day he chose security over his dreams. He spent his days working in the fields, his once adventurous spirit now buried under the weight of his choices. One evening, as Thomas sat on his porch watching the sunset, a lone traveler approached. The traveler, with a twinkle in his eye and a story in every wrinkle, reminded Thomas of the young man he once was. He sat down and began to share tales of distant lands, of adventures and discoveries, of dreams that had been chased and goals that had been conquered. As Thomas listened, a spark ignited within him, a flicker of the old adventurous spirit. Maybe it was the traveler's infectious enthusiasm, or the realization that life was too short to be lived in regret. Whatever the reason, Thomas found himself smiling for the first time in years. When the traveler finally rose to leave, Thomas felt a surge of emotion. He wanted to ask the traveler to stay, to share in his stories, to dream again. But as the traveler walked away, Thomas realized it was too late. The dreams he'd sold to feed his family were gone, and the nightingale's song had ended. All that was left was the regret that echoed in his heart.